Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to start a read-along series. I started Thomas Hardy's Jude the Obscure yesterday, and I was trying to think of how I wanted to do my review and my thoughts for this book, how I wanted to do those on my channel. And I realized since this book is split into 6 parts, I'm going to do kind of a read-along series and do one video for every part of the novel. And that way I will have a little bit more time to discuss a little bit more in depth the events of the part, and some of my thoughts on each part. And then that way at the end we can have 6 videos on the channel instead of just one kind of brief overview of the book. So Jude the Obscure, this is a novel by Thomas Hardy. It's considered one of his masterpieces. It's also one of his most depressing novels. Of course, for those of you who know about Thomas Hardy, you will know that he is known for his gloomy prose. He's known for his very somber, depressing characters and plot lines. So I have completed part 1. I don't know if you can see here. I've completed part 1 in this novel, which brings us to page 75. So the first 75 pages of this are part 1. And a lot happens in part 1. So before I keep going, I do just want to say that this is not going to be spoiler free. So if you have not read this book yet, stop here and read it and then watch this after you've read it, because I don't want to spoil anything for you. But if you're okay with getting something spoiled, then by all means keep on watching this video and the rest of this series. All right, so part 1, we get introduced to our main character, Jude. When the novel opens, the first scene is the scene of the local schoolmaster packing up his belongings and moving out of this small country town to the next closest city, which is a city called Christminster. And the teacher is leaving to get a university degree and then to become ordained. And Jude is one of his students. And when we meet Jude, Jude is 11 years old, and he is fastidious. He is all about learning and educating himself, and he is very much a bookish child. And so he is distraught by the leaving, by the departure of his teacher. It wrecks him. And he wants to find a way to go to Christminster to stay with his teacher. So Jude is 11 years old, and he lives with his great aunt Drusilla Folly, who is a baker. At the very beginning of the story, we don't get a lot of detail about why he's living with his great aunt, except that his parents had some sort of a falling out, a problem in the relationship, and could no longer raise Jude. It's later on in part 1 that we get more information as to why his parents let Jude go and why his great aunt Drusilla decided to raise him. And she's by no means a kind aunt. She is very particular. She is very rigid in her structures, and she doesn't necessarily like the fact that Jude has been living with her, and she treats him more as an employee slash house servant more than a relative of hers. So after this teacher leaves, Jude continues on with his life, which is primarily consisting of helping his aunt with the family's bakery. His aunt is a baker who cooks baked goods out of her home and then sells them in the town and in the surrounding villages. And so Jude works with his aunt, and he also works with a local farmer in the village, where his job is to shake a rattle and scare away rooks and other birds that land on in the fields and eat the stray wheat and corn and the different products that this farmer is growing in his field. And so this one particular day after the teacher has left, he is very depressed, and one of the last things his teacher told him was to be kind to the people around him and to be kind to the animals. And so his teacher was very adamant with him about treating the earth with respect. And so he decides not to shake this rattle. He wants to let the birds just fall to the ground and eat all of the stray wheat and corn and these different products. And the farmer catches him not doing his job, slacking off, and letting the birds eat off of the ground. And so the farmer gets mad at him and fires him from his job. So he goes home to his aunt, tells his aunt that he has lost his job, and his aunt is just incredibly annoyed with his what she thinks as his lack of motivation. Of course, in his 11-year-old boy mind, he is upholding the final request bestowed upon him by his teacher. And so his aunt says, you really need to find something to do. I don't have enough for you to do here. I need you to take care of yourself because, I have to work. So she basically just said, get lost, go do your own thing. I don't need you here. And so Jude leaves, and he decides that he is going to find his own way to Christminster. And in his mind, he has put Christminster as the embodiment of all that is good in the world. And throughout the entire first part of this novel, Christminster is always referred to as the place to be. It is the penultimate city where nothing bad ever happens and where everything good and just takes place. And so there's a lot put on Christminster from the very beginning, and that is a key set piece and a key idea through the rest of the first part, and I'm assuming through the rest of the entire novel. So Jude decides to set out to find Christminster. And he's a young boy, so he has to ask lots of different people for directions, ask lots of different people that he comes across in his village if they have been to Christminster, how he can find his way there. He's trying to figure out what he needs to do for money to be able to get there. Even though he is only 11, he is quite smart of knowing that he'll have to have money for his voyage and knowing that he'll have to figure out the smartest way to get to Christminster and what he will do once he gets there for food and for shelter. And his idea is to go to the city and find his teacher and live with him. So he asks lots of different people about how to get to Christminster, and lots of the people he asks, tell him, oh, it's not too far. You just go that way. Go. Follow this road or follow this path. And no one really helps him, but no one helps him really beyond just a very vague direction or a very vague answer to his question. And so it's not until he meets the traveling doctor, Dr. Vilbert, who is really more of a con man, quack doctor, who's very well known in amongst the towns around Christminster. Jude asks him if he's ever been to the city, and the doctor replies that yes, he's been there, dozens of times, and he has a medical center that operates out of the city, and that of course he can help Jude get there. And so through their conversations, Jude explains to this doctor that he wants to become a scholar when he's older, that he wants to go to Christminster and get a degree, become ordained in the church, or become a professor and a scholar. And that is his ultimate life goal. And so this doctor says, oh, well, I went to university in Christminster. I could give you my grammars for Greek and Latin so you could start to teach yourself. That way you can be ahead of the game when you eventually make it to Christminster. And of course, Jude is happier than anything by this proposition. He would love to get his hands on grammars of Greek and Latin. That is what his passion is to learn as much as he can, as soon as he can. And so this doctor tells him that, yes, I will give you 2 grammars, a Greek grammar and a Latin grammar. All you have to do is promote my name in your town, promote my cure-all products, my cure-all medications, come back, give me the orders for my products, and I will give you in return the 2 grammars. And so Jude thinks, this is a fantastic way for him to get his hands on these books, and it's easy. All he has to do is promote this doctor's products and get orders for him. So when Jude meets back up with this doctor at their appointed time, which is I think a couple weeks later, the length of time between the 2 meetings isn't specified in the first part. But when they meet back up together, Jude gives the doctor all of his orders for his products, and when he asks the doctor for the 2 grammars, Dr. Vilbert completely brushes it aside and doesn't even remember what he promised Jude. And so Jude is crushed by this. Because he had, pinned so much of his hopes on these 2 grammars. And so he ends up writing a letter to his to his teacher who moved to Christminster, requesting a grammar for Greek and Latin, which many weeks later they do show up, two old, battered and tattered copies of a Greek and Latin grammar, which have all been scribbled in by numerous different students. But Jude is elated to have them, and so he starts to read them, and he is instantly put out when he realizes that there is no sort of, as he says, transmutation of the words he knows in English directly to their counterpart in Greek or in Latin, and that it's going to take him years and years and years to be able to learn these new languages, because he'll have to learn them word by word. And so he's just completely put out by the amount of work that lays before him, and he is utterly shocked at what he thinks must be the superhuman mental capacity of the scholars in Christminster who learn all of these languages word by word. And so for the next couple of days he's very depressed, and then he decides that he will just have to do the work, and so he starts reading these books every chance he gets. When he's driving his family's cart full of baked goods, he'll sit up front with the book open on his lap, reading it as he's driving. He reads when he walks between the fields during his job in the day. He reads all night long by candlelight. He doesn't even sleep anymore. He just reads all the time, and he just has this endless capacity of wonder, and this endless capacity to absorb knowledge and to learn. And so after this episode happens with him receiving these two grammars, a couple of years go by in the book, or a handful of years go by. He's 11 when he receives his grammars, and the next scenes that take place in part 1, he's 19 years old. And so a couple of years go by, and he reads every day, and he has become very proficient in Greek and Latin, and reading Homer and biblical texts in their original translations, or in the original editions, without help of a translation. And so one day he's walking home from work, home to his great aunt's house, when he is hit in the head by a flying object, which turns out to be the offal from a pig that is being washed in a river by 3 girls. And so he's on a road with a row of shrubs on one side, and then there's a farm property on the other side of the shrubs, and that's where these women are cleaning this pig. And so he walks over to the shrub, and he leans over to talk to the women, and he says, I think one of you threw this out on the road. Here it is. I just wanted to give it back to you. And all the 3 girls are young, and they kind of giggle about who could have thrown it at this nice young man who passed them, and all kind of flirtatiously banter back and forth with him. And then one of the girls gets up and walks over to him and takes it back. And she exchanges a bit of a conversation with Jude, and her name is Arabella Dunn, and she requests that Jude come back and meet her the next day, because they talked for about 10 or 15 minutes, it sounds like, through the book, through the amount of dialogue that's exchanged, and it's quite obvious that Arabella is taken with Jude. And so Jude says that sure, he'll come back the next day. The next Sunday, he decides to go back, even though he really kicks himself that he promised his Sunday away, because that his day where he gets most of his reading done, right? He wants to just stay home and read all day and work on his Greek and his Latin. But he convinces himself that he only promised an afternoon walk, and that he won't have to stay all day. However, when he goes to Arabella's house, their afternoon walk turns into a full day walking, where they end up going to a tavern and then back to her house, and he is hit by the realization that she essentially expects him to court her, and that is also what her entire family expects of him. And so what he thought was just an afternoon actually turns out to be a much larger promise on his part. And at first he's very put off by this, but then slowly Arabella starts to work this sort of magic within him, and he starts dropping off all of his former priorities. And by the end of this first day with Arabella, as he is walking home late at night, thoughts of his thoughts of his books and of his future plans and of his education seem to completely fade for him. They seem to completely go into the back of his mind, and he seems to be a totally different man when he is around Arabella than when he is alone. All of his former interests and former structures in his life seem to completely fall away. And so they see each other for a few months, and then one day Arabella is talking with one of her friends who suggests a trick that Arabella could play on Jude that will ensure that Arabella will be able to keep Jude in a relationship with her, and may even be able to get Jude to propose marriage to her sooner than Jude would have naturally done. And so Arabella pulls this trick, which essentially she convinces, or she tricks and then convinces Jude to sleep with her. And then she tells him several weeks later that she is pregnant, and this forces Jude to marry her. By the laws of the local community where they live, it would not be respectable of him to not marry her. So he changes all of his plans again, and moves in with her, and says that he will marry her and he will help her raise their child, and really steps up. And both the families, Jude's aunt and Arabella's family, of course, is very pleased by Jude's decision to do this. And it only comes out later, a couple of weeks later, that Arabella admits to Jude that she is not pregnant, that she in fact lied to him in order to get him to marry her. And of course, Jude is completely put off by this. He is completely shattered because he quit his past life. He canceled, or he removed himself from any of the activities that he had put so much of his effort towards for so many years. He put away his readings, he put away his studyings and his writings to get a good job, to be able to pay for their new child, and to help raise Arabella, or to help Arabella raise this child. And so when he finds out that it's all a lie, it really crushes him, and he really doesn't know. He doesn't know at all what to make of it. Oh, sorry, almost knocked it over. He doesn't know at all what to make of it. And so basically, for the rest of the part, for the rest of the first part, we have this really interesting relationship between Jude and Arabella, because Jude he realizes that this marriage that they are in is not fitting for either party that's involved. He's unhappy in the marriage. Arabella's unhappy in the marriage because she was assuming that Jude would change, and somehow in her mind she had it that even through this trickery that she was going to pull, that Jude would somehow be okay with that, and that Jude would somehow come around to her, and it wouldn't bother him. And of course, it's quite an emotional trick to play, and it hit Jude very hard. And so the last scene that we have in part one is Jude and Arabella have been fattening up a pig, and it is time for this pig to be slaughtered. The night before the slaughtering was supposed to happen, it snowed, and so their butcher wasn't able to come in from the town to kill this pig, and so Jude has to kill it himself. And what this part really does a great job of achieving is it shows the stark differences between Jude and Arabella. Jude is very bookish. He's very intellectual. He spends most all of his time in his head, whereas Arabella is very worldly. She knows how the world works. She knows how to interact with the world. She knows how to fit herself into the world. And so we see these two very stark differences in character between these two individuals. So Jude agrees to kill this pig because he doesn't want to make his wife do it. He says, he takes the responsibility to kill this pig. But he says that if he's going to do so, he wants to kill it quickly to get it out of its misery. Arabella wants him to slowly bleed it so that the quality of the meat is better. And so Jude just kills this pig as fast as he can to make it, get out of its suffering as soon as possible. And Arabella gets incredibly mad at him that he spoiled so much good meat. And there's a lot of very interesting conversation between Jude and Arabella in this part, where it really reveals more about how bad they are for each other, about how truly different they are, and different beyond just being opposite, but being polar opposite, and they really don't have anything in common that they share. Even their relationship, Jude starts to realize how much of a game it really was to Arabella, and it was more about Arabella trying to win Jude almost as some sort of a prize, and Jude just feels he feels betrayed at the end of part one, and he tries to kill himself. He walks onto a frozen lake, tries to break the ice to fall through. The ice won't break, and so he decides that he is obviously so worthless that he is not even worth death by suicide, and he decides if he can't kill himself, he will go by the means that all disrespected people go by, and he will go get drunk. And so he goes to a bar, and he just drinks himself away, and he just gets as drunk as he possibly can, and then he staggers home. And when he gets home, he discovers that Arabella is not there. There's a note from her that says she has decided to go with her family and immigrate to Australia, and that she is not coming back for him. And he responds in a letter saying that he is perfectly fine with her going, and that is the best thing for her to do. And he even encloses the money that they received from selling the pig. And so he basically just, they write each other off in a letter. But Jude is still very much shattered by all of his interactions with Arabella, by their marriage, by the betrayal that he feels. And it's not until the very end of end of part one, where he goes to a broker's shop, and he sees a picture, and it's a picture in a frame, and it's a picture of him, and he realizes that it is the portrait and the frame that he gave to Arabella on their wedding day, and he realizes that she has sold it off in her family's auctioning off of their personal possessions before they left the country. And this is the moment that he really is able to completely shed off the last remaining feelings of affection toward Arabella, because he realizes how much he basically realizes the mistake that he made, and he realizes how he completely put off everything that he once cared about for something that turned out to be such a bad, something that put him in such a bad way. And so the first part ends on a very bleak note, which I know this entire novel will end on a very bleak note. So the end of part one, he is no longer married. He feels completely hopeless and hopeless in life. He decides that he is so worthless that he's not even worth being graced by death by suicide, and so he is forced to live out the rest of his days in a secluded misery. He feels that he has no hope of ever achieving his dream of making it to Christminster, although he knows that if he doesn't try now, he will never be able to. And so at the end of part one, he sets back out for Christminster, but it's under a more dark tone than it was the first time, and it's almost a last march sort of effort of, if I'm not able to make it this time, I will never try again. And so part one ends with him heading toward Christminster, wondering if his teacher is still there, wondering if he will ever be able to lace back the shattered pieces of his life and pursue what feels like his long lost dream of being a scholar and of getting a university degree and achieving this intellectual prowess that he has had his mind set on for so many years. So that's part one. That's part one of 6. I know this video went a little bit long. I'm not sure what the links of the other videos will be, but probably around the same length. Each part seems to be around the same amount of pages. It's a fantastic novel. I'm really enjoying it. It is gloomy, it is depressing, but it's absolutely beautiful. The characters are very vivid and lifelike, and the prose are beautiful and stunning. It's an absolutely fantastic read. I would highly recommend it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and to subscribe to my channel if you are not already subscribed. If you are a subscriber, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I will see you in the next video for Jude the Obscure Part 2. Bye for now.